If you've ever watched Zexrow play, you probably noticed how ridiculous his accuracy is. Even in a game like Fortnite, where bloom is prevalent, he still manages to show off and use his insane aim to his advantage. Now, how did he get so good at aiming? The answer is simple. He grinded Kovacs. Kovacs is an FPS aim trainer that you can buy in the Steam store for $10. It's actually on sale now for $6. If you ask any Fortnite pros, there's a good chance they use Kovacs daily. Kovacs has tons of different games that focus on every aspect of aiming, from tracking and long-range accuracy to quick flicks and 180 close-range aim. There are specific courses that I will go into depth into later in the video that translate extremely well to different situations in Fortnite. So trust me when I say this, that the $10 to buy Kovacs will be worth every dollar. So before I get to which games you should practice, I'll show how to set up your Fortnite sensitivity and the best settings within Kovacs. The first thing you want to do is click Game Options and Weapons, then make sure Hide Weapons is checked. After that, go to Video.
Mad or not? So hide weapons. Weapons. Hide weapon. Check. Okay. Now what?
Video options and put in the resolution you use for Fortnite. So if you're playing stretched, choose the res you're using. After that, put the game in full screen and go to the main options. Set your FOV to 80 and FOV measurement to clamped horizontal if you're using native res or anything stretched, like 1444 by 10.
Okay.
.1080, 1600 by 1080, etc. Only if you're playing on an ultra-wide monitor, where your res is something like 2060 by 1080, will you use 80 FOV and a horizontal for FOV measurement. If you're unsure, just ask me in the comments which FOV measurement to use and I'll be sure to help you out, but 99% of you will use 80 FOV and clamped horizontal. So now onto your sensitivity settings. There are two different ways to get your Fortnite sense within Kovacs. If you look at the drop-down menu for sensitivity scale, you will see Fortnite slider and Fortnite config. The easiest way to get your sense is through Fortnite slider. In the horizontal sensitivity, just put your X in game sense for Fortnite. So if you play on 0.08 in game sense, you'll just put 0.08 for your sensitivity. If you play on a different vertical sensitivity, which would be your Y sense, you'll have to uncheck the box next to vertical lock to horizontal sense. The only downside is that while this is close to your Fortnite sensitivity, it won't be 100% accurate because Fortnite actually lies to you about your exact sense. This happens because the sliders used on Fortnite have decibels and not whole values if you use your mouse to change your res instead of arrow keys. In order to get your exact Fortnite sensitivity in Kovacs, you'll need to download a client settings program, which I will leave a link to in the description. After you download it, you'll need to extract it using WinRAR or 7-zip, which will make a new folder for the file on your computer. You'll then open the new folder and run Client Settings Program. Now, here is where we import your personal Fortnite settings to get your exact values. So there's also two ways to do this part. The first way is to press File and Open, then input the command which I will leave in the description. This should bring up one folder. If it brings up more than one, sort through them until you find clientsettings.save, which is what you will open. The other method to import your settings requires you to log into your Epic account, so instead of pressing File Open, you'll press File Import on the File tab. Both methods should give you your exact settings, which you should then see on your screen. Now, you'll go back into Kovacs and change your sensitivity scale to Fortnite config instead of Fortnite slider. Then, copy and paste the mount sensitivity X and mount sensitivity Y from your client settings program into Kovacs after you change it to Fortnite config. So now we finally have our exact Fortnite sensitivity into Kovacs. The last thing we need to do is get our ADS sensitivity. So what I do for this, and what Kovac himself recommends, is when you're using ADS sensitivity is to only change that sensitivity for ADS games, which require it, such as Ascended Tracking V2 and other tracking game. Go to the game options and down to weapon options, and click on the weapon name. For Ascended Tracking, that should be Alcove Tracker, and if you're playing the Fortnite tracking game, it should say Fortnite AR. Now, scroll down and click on the box to override your sensitivity only for these specific ADS game situations. Again, change this to Fortnite config and go back to the client settings file and take the targeting slow sensitivity and then multiply it by each mount sensitivity for value X and Y. Then input config. The easiest way to get your sense is through Fortnite slider, game sense, which would be your Y-Sense, you'll have to uncheck the box next to your Fortnite sensitivity. It won't be because the slider program, which I will unzip settings use. Command, which I will let you find fit to import your on the file. Go back into Kovacs and change your sensitivity scale to Fortnite config instead of Fortnite slider. Then copy and paste the mount sensitivity X and mount sensitivity Y from your client settings program into Kovacs after you change it to Fortnite config. So now we finally have our exact Fortnite sensitivity into Kovacs. The last thing we need to do is get our ADS sensitivity. So what I do for this, and what Kovac himself recommends, is when you're using ADS sensitivity is to only change that sensitivity for ADS games, which require it, such as Ascended Tracking V2 and other tracking game. Go to the game options and down to weapon options, and click on the weapon name. For Ascended Tracking, that should be Alcove Tracker, and if you're playing the Fortnite tracking game, it should say Fortnite AR. Now, scroll down and click on the box to override your sensitivity only for these specific ADS game situations. Again, change this to Fortnite config and go back to the client settings file.
Not supposed to be live.